Evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the 13th episode of Coffee Table Conversation. We are in the 103rd day of lockdown and the impact of pandemic is now visible. We have touched about 6.6 lakh cases and the number of cases are rising rapidly. The silver lining remains the high recovery rate. As many people have reached back to their homeland, this has led to an additional pressure on agriculture, and this can be seen evidently from the sowing acreage numbers that have come for the Kharif crop lately. While this has led to another important question of hunger, and you would be surprised to know that in spite of having excess of food grains with us, we hold the 108th place in World Hunger Index, which is way below Sri Lanka and Pakistan. I will not dwell into the aspect of nutrition. So this leads to a demand for free ration through PDS system. While the PM has announced 5 kg rice and 1 kg chana under the Annadan Yojana, will this be enough for a family is a question to be dwelled upon. If you had any conversation with any small street vendor who hails from a different state, their answers would echo the same response. I can make some money here to feed my family. I'm not sure if I can make the same amount of money back home. And we still would find people bargaining with them. The Azim Premji Foundation did a survey on livelihood in Delhi during the pandemic, which has shown some harsh reality that 9 out of 10 have reduced consumption of food and 3 out of 4 have not enough money to buy essentials. One thing which becomes evidently clear is a complete apathy from the government, the rich and the middle class. We have completely ignored the less fortunate and prefer to live in the quarantine castles and mindsets. This reminds me of a great Chinese famine of the 1960s. The urban had no idea what the rest of the country was doing and the media was blind as ever. Maybe our media is following the Chinese footstep. To discuss this important topic on survival management strategies of poor workers, which in my opinion couldn't be on a better day than Guru Purnima, is Dr. Agnelo Menezes. He's the professor of economics. He retired as principal of St. Xavier's College and continues to teach there and is very fondly called as Aggie Sir. He's also visiting faculty for BSc Institute and JBIMS. He carried out his thesis on contribution of rag pickers in Mumbai to the informal economy in the recycling sector. Besides teaching in college, he's actively involved in social work. So before I hand over the floor to you, I would like to say this behalf of students on today that thank you so much to you and all the teachers who selflessly taught us, inspired us and made us a better person. We are truly in debt to all of you forever.
Thank you. Thank you, Neil. I can start, Neil?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me over here to talk to you about something that is very dear to my heart, the poor, okay, and their survival strategies. Now, when I'm saying survival strategies of the poor, what I want you to bear in mind is, I'll be talking like what Neil was saying just now about their plight, but I need you to appreciate, as students of management, I need you to appreciate their versatility. I need you to appreciate the tenacity. I need you to appreciate their grit and determination in going through stuff, in going through tough stuff and coming out with their heads held high. I'm not saying coming up in 7 heavens because life is not so rosy-cozy for them, but I'm sure you know the term head held high. Okay, they don't become beggars, they don't become miserable people, but they come out with their heads held high. Now, this is why they come here to work. They leave their homes, they leave the comforts of their home, and they come here to work. They come here to slog it out. So that through the slogging, they'll be able to get their income and get their people at home, back in the rural areas, get them to have some kind of a life, which is a dignified life, which may not be a high-end life, but a dignified life. And more importantly, maybe even get their children to be educated with the hope that this education that the children acquire will help these poor people come out from this below the poverty line or on the poverty line status to a more safer within the middle class status. Now, this is what I want you to bear in mind, looking for their tenacity, looking for their versatility, and looking for the capacity to be human. This is what I want to share with you as I go through these PPTs with you. I would like you to also record questions because you may want to ask me questions either as a comment or either as a correction or either as a challenge. And you know, you learned with me, you know, I enjoy all these three types of interactions with students. I have removed animation completely so that we get a lot of time to engage with each other. And I'm putting full screens except for one or two of them. Now, the word that I'm asking you to pay attention to the first bullet, I have intended some bullets so that you can see the break in the reading. It becomes easier. We are talking about 10 crore Indian heterogeneous poor workers, and I'm punching the word heterogeneous because over here you got to remember, and this is one mistake that a lot of policymakers are doing. They treat poverty as a singular homogeneous phenomenon. That is not true. Poverty is multivariate. Different sections of Indian society, if you go across the globe, different sections of world people will have different engagements with poverty. So poor, let's get this very clear from the start, are not a homogeneous group of people. And as management students, this becomes an important aspect because you got to know that you're looking at people with a variety of skills and not people with a singular skill. So when you know that they come with a variety of skills, you are engaging with these kind of workers differently for different categories. Okay, so I need you to be conscious of the fact that this is not a homogeneous group of individuals. And this set of poor workers forms about 20% of the Indian workforce. Now, when I'm saying 20% of the Indian workforce, I'm talking about the adult workforce. Please remember, a lot of these people also contain child laborers. But then data cannot capture child labor. And that will create a shame for us in the global space. So this 20% is Indian adult workforce. Now that's a big amount of people helping us to form our economy, to take our economy to where it is. And this is why I'm calling them the bulwark of the Indian economy. And they are doing it through a system that does not account for them. You have done, when you were doing macroeconomics with me, you have done national income accounting. The work of these poor Indians is not accounted for. And yet, on an estimation, we can say that 10% of India's GDP comes from the informal sector directly. Now, why am I punching over directly? Because you got to remember that the formal sector is highly connected with the informal sector. Now, that interconnection is not accounted for in this 10% of GDP that I'm talking to you about. This 10% is direct effort, direct strain and work that the poor people do in order to get their income, which is not accounted for in our national income. Okay, so when we were once presenting a paper in Christ University, this is what we are trying to say, that the national income is rather underestimated because it does not take into account the contribution of the informal sector. Okay, so maybe at some point of time, we will be compelled to change our methodology of measuring national income. But here's a nice statement I picked up from India today. These poor people are the bulls that pull the yoke of the Indian economy. And I like this because it's very metaphorical. If you have seen the movie Do Biga Zameen, you will see that lady, I think Nuttan or somebody, pulling the yoke, pulling the plow because she could not afford to have a bull. So here you can see metaphorically, the bulls over here are the poor people. The yoke is the burden of the Indian economy. And you'll find these people in all the visible activities. And now I want you to pay attention to the word visible. So you will see the building, but we hardly notice the worker who has created the building. You will see the bridge, but we hardly notice the worker who has built the bridge. So if you think in terms of anything that is visible, there is an invisibilized worker who has contributed to that creation. So we know that there's a courier who comes and delivers. And once he delivers a package either to Amazon or whatever system you're looking at, we just forget about that person who has delivered. And we simply think that mechanical processes have brought the parcel to our door. So you'll find these workers everywhere, from construction to transportation to delivery at our doorsteps. And yet, they are the most underappreciated And this word, I hope it pinches you when you're hearing me saying it. Invisible people. Now, why am I punching the word invisible and hoping that you get smitten by that word? Is I'm very sure, like me, imagine me being shocked when I started seeing those pictures in the newspaper in the later half of April, or in the early half of April, when they were showing millions and millions of workers walking home. And suddenly they emerged onto the scene. And suddenly they came into our consciousness. And we started talking about them. Unfortunately, at least amongst the people that I was engaging with, they was being spoken about, hey, these are the rats who are running away. They are the scums of the earth who are running away. Okay, look at them. No, they are the carriers of COVID and those kind of things. Now, this is a very unfair way of describing this group of people, because this group of people were not going because they were wanting to spread COVID. They were going because they wanted to avoid it. They were going because they wanted to survive. They were going because the cities treated them very, very harshly, and policy totally ignored them. Can you imagine a person whose job is dependent on an everyday income, whose life is dependent on everyday income? That person is given a 4-hour notice that there is going to be an all India lockdown. In those 4 hours, and that too in the late hours of the evening, when the shops were not open and you could not, get yourself provisioned, these people were left high and dry. So this is what I mean by saying policy simply ignored them. Policy thought that they would not emerge. And they emerged. They literally emerged because their pressure, their hardships compelled them to come into the open space and show themselves as, hey, listen, even we are human beings. Things are not going well for us. We too need to survive. Now, this group that I'm talking to you about is mostly the relocated workers. And I'm punching some words. Notice, till now, I have not used the word migrants. And my next slide will tell you why I'm not going to use that word at all for them. So I'm calling them relocated workers. They have moved out of rural areas and come to urban spaces. They have moved out of rural areas and gone to the periphery of urban spaces. Or they have moved out of very, very impoverished rural spaces and gone to some little better space in the rural sector. But these are relocated workers. And they have come here to eke a living. Not like you and me, where I can simply say, listen, I'm going to Bangalore to teach in IIM Bangalore. And I'm going there to live a hearty life. I'm going to earn a lot. I'm going to live in a proper house. These people, when they come with a high level of uncertainty. Management students, you know how uncertainty and risk go together. They come here with a high level of uncertainty, ready to take on the risk. When I shift, me with my education and my kind of qualification, when I shift, I'm able to hedge my risks. These people come in uncertainty and no hedging of risks. And when they come, they literally come from a nothing to at least a something. Because they know that in the urban space, somehow or the other, they will be able to survive. And this is why I'm not going to call them migrants. Trump, and I'm sure you've been in touch with this guy, he has very sneeringly, very insultingly called migrants parasites, who are essentially homeless and totally reliant on the state for their residence. And over here, residence is both livelihood and life. Now, you got to remember that Trump, he hates the migrant group. In fact, he put the children in cages. He separated the parents from the children, and so on and so forth. So this word is not a very good word to use. And I'm going to tell you why. Because there are many of us who are migrants. And we would not like to be called migrants because we think that we are educated. We are holding white-collar jobs. And so that term migrant cannot be attached to us. So this word has become a derogative word. And therefore, I'm urging you when you're talking about this group of people, not to use that word. You know, when you say migrants, and I'm looking back at the slides, you're going to call them perpetual outsiders. Perpetual outsiders, and you've seen how political parties have treated them. Neglected by the states and center. And in India, at least, they usually come from 2 or 3 of the poorest states. The bulk comes from 2 or 3 of the poorest states. And when I was a student, today that word is not used anymore, there was a term coined. It was called the Bimaru States, B-I-M-A-R-U, the Bimaru States. And this person who coined it, he was in charge of the census reports for India. He, during Rajiv Gandhi's time, he created this term, and you can see he created it very closely connected to the word Bimari. Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and UP. The Bimaru states. Okay. Very soon, when India liberalized, they said this term cannot be used anymore because it's giving India a bad name. So the acronym Bimaru has totally been forgotten. I'm very sure to many of you, this is the first time you're hearing this acronym, the Bimaru states. So when I talk in terms of coming from the poorest states in India, they come from the Bimaru states, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and UP, mainly Bihar and UP. Now, I'm not saying they don't come from other states. I have worked with these kind of workers who have come from Telangana. I've worked with people who have come from Tamil Nadu. I've worked with people who have come from Jalna, right here in Maharashtra. But the bulk of them comes from the poorer states. Okay, and I hope you appreciate the acronym, the Bimaru states. Now, when we use this word migrants, and therefore I'm appealing to you not to use this term, we demean these people. We forget about their Indian citizenship. They are Indian, they are human beings, they are Indians. And we feel no qualms in seeing them trudging and prodding and struggling to go back to their native space, which will offer them not much of any kind of economic upgradation, but definitely the warmth of their family and their community. So I'm going to use the word, they are poor returnees, or I'm going to call them relocated poor workers. Now, this whole talk that I'm giving you is from an article, which if Neil asked me, I will share it with you. I'll ask the permission of that, the organization that has published this paper, and I'll share it with you. Now, over there, I began by pleading with the readers to look at the term migrants as being obnoxious, as being something that is extremely insulting and derogatory. If you are going to use the word migrants, then we'll use it universally. You call me a migrant because my parents have come from Goa to Bombay. You call yourself a migrant if you have come from somewhere to Mumbai. And if you're going to use it universally, then I have no problem. But if you're going to brand only the poor as being migrants, then I'm going to have problems with you. So I'm not going to use the word migrants at all. And I'm very sure I won't even slip and use the word migrants in the course of my discussion with you. Now, why did they leave their rural spaces? For the hostile, and you've studied with me, you know I'm very choosy of my words, and I'm using the word hostile urban space. Hostile commercially. Urban spaces are inflated spaces. And in this inflated, inflation-induced space, they have to survive. So management students look at the way they will survive in the face of inflation. And they survive in the face of political oppression. You have seen the way the Biharis were treated in Mumbai some time ago. You've seen political parties coming heavily against them. Today, we are going to be begging, those same political parties are going to be begging of these people to come back, because opposite my college, and just as I'm talking to you, I'm staying in the college hostel and I'm talking to you from there. Opposite my college on Azad Maidan, the metro work has come to a halt. And when we talk in terms of unlock and begin again, or whatever they are calling those terms, please remember the metro work has not yet started. We are going to be begging of these people to come back. So I'm hoping that that is a lesson we have learned, that we cannot be hostile to another Indian who, because of constitutional sanction, where you can go across the country and work anywhere in the country, we've got to allow these people to come here and contribute to the health of an urban space. Please remember, again, I'm come back to the metro. The metro will not do one penny's worth of advantage to the rural spaces that they are working from. All these high rises that they help in building, they have not, because they have built over here, their houses have not become pakka houses. Because they build roads over here, their kacha roads have not become pakka roads. So they literally come here and do you and me a service. Now, why have they come here? And here I have got two animations I want to share with you. One is, and in economics we use this term, in demographics we use this term, push and pull factors. They're pushed out of the rural spaces. Why? Because in the rural spaces, they have no gainful, again I'm choosing words. When you and I take up a job, we look out for gainful employment. And by gainful over here, I'm talking in terms of remunerative, which may be even lucrative, but also job satisfying. So gainful, perpetual jobs. I've used two different adjectives, gainful and perpetual, because that is what they are hoping for. When I'm saying perpetual, I'm not talking about permanent employment. I'm talking about regular employment, maybe with different employees in different spaces. Now, this cannot be guaranteed for them in the rural spaces. You know, Neil at the start, he spoke in terms of they have gone back. Now, fortunately for India, these people have gone back in the sowing season. So many of them are going to be employed in the sowing season, and we may not feel the pinch yet, because a phenomenon that we have noticed about our workers, our relocated workers, is that around this time, many of them go back to their gaon, to their villages, to carry out, to help in the sowing season. Let the sowing season get over, and we will start feeling the pinch of the absence of the lack of these workers over here. Many of them have been pushed out of their villages because of, and here is where you've heard me in class, you've heard me talking about these things in class, because of the corporatization, because of the urbanization of rural spaces. They have lost jal, they have lost jungle, they have lost jameen. They have simply been displaced. And here is something I may have said in your class, and I'm sure some of you will recall if I have said it in class. They have been pushed out because in India, across the world, especially after 1980 and in the world and 1990 in India, we have been pursuing policies that bring about development by displacement. Development by displacement. So I hope under push factor, when you're looking at the second bullet, you're looking at displacement. Loss of jungle and zameen. And therefore, whatever kind of jobs you were getting in the rural areas is not there, and therefore they have to come to the urban areas. And here is another thing that I hope as management students, you are going to fight this tooth and nail. As students who are educated, you're going to fight this tooth and nail. And that is heavy indebtedness induced by customs, rituals, and traditions. We've got here in the college just now, we were very fortunate that one of our security workers managed to stay back, and he's helping us with the security over here. And his son recently got married, and he was telling me that he had to take a loan. He could not go for the marriage, but he had to take a loan, send money over there, and he is going to be indebted now for a large number of years because he was too scared to break the traditions. He was too scared of the scars that his family would have to carry if and when the villagers started saying, "Aapka aadmi Mumbai mein hai aur kuch nahi kar raha hai yahan. You're breaking all traditions, you're breaking all kinds of rituals and habits over here." So to avoid that kind of social smear, he's got into heavy indebtedness. So here is a double-edged sword. Because he's come to Mumbai, they think that he's earning sufficiently, and therefore they expect him to finance all the traditions and rituals. And furthermore, because he has taken a debt, he continues to be an indebted worker forever. So these were the push factors. And the last point, again, heavy indebtedness, I want you to pay attention to this point because you engage with people. I hope you are able to convince them that if carrying out a ritual, if carrying out a tradition, whatever be your religion or creed, if that ritual causes you to go into debt, think 100 times before you go in for fulfilling that ritual. The pull factors. And you all know about liberalization, privatization, and globalization. As a student, in the 1970s and early 80s, I saw money going to the villages. World Bank would come and park money in the villages. Okay, a foreign company would come and park money in the villages, and literally in the villages, I mean to say. Now you're seeing money going more and more towards the urban spaces. So the urbanization of capital. And here is something, I don't know whether I said this to you in class, or I may have said you've forgotten it, but now that you are engaging with these kind of discussions, please go to the net and engage with this thinker. He's a geographer from geography. He's from New York University. His name is David Harvey, Harvey. David Harvey was among the first social scientists to start pointing out this concept of the urbanization of capital. And because investments is moving more and more towards urban spaces, rural spaces are drying off capital, drying off investments, and therefore jobs are not taking place over there. Hence, they are being pulled towards the urban spaces. I hope you're not one of these people who would say that these people are being pulled towards a place like Mumbai because of Bollywood. I think that's being very, very cheap. That's being very, very mean. And I'm sure with the kind of education you have received, and especially because you're a JBIMS student, you are not going to be so demeaning and saying that they have come over here to become a hero in Bollywood. Please remember, they have come here in order to be a hero to their families by sending remuneration, by sending remittances home, so that keep their families alive. Why have they come over here? Because we urbanites have many indulgences. We have lots and lots of wants. We do not want to clean our floor. The naukar will come and clean our floor. We do not want to clean our bhartan. The naukar will come and clean our bhartan. So to satisfy our many indulgences, they know that there are many, many jobs available for these very lazy, indulgent people. And so they know that when they come here, they will get a job. However lowly, however undignified that job may be, they know that they'll get a job. And please remember, they have come over here in order to survive, because the payment is better. And imagine another thing better. I know of security workers who are given 5,000 rupees a month for 12 hours of work. But that 5,000 is nearly 10 to 15 times better than what you would have got if you were working in the village. And more importantly, there's a persistence of the jobs. Whereas in the village, the jobs are seasonal. In the village, the jobs are occasional. Over here, we know that there's a persistence of job, and therefore, as true management, untrained management people, they know where their money will come from through persistence of jobs. Hence, they are pulled towards the urban spaces. So I've created for you just now a background as to why these people have come here. They have not come here for herogiri. They have not come here in order to become some big kind of a lord. They have simply come here to survive. And please don't blemish these people by saying that some of these migrants have gone to become dons, have gone to become mafia and those kind of things. Those are the exceptions. We are discussing the majority of the people. And the majority of the people are people who are wanting to survive. In the informal sector, in the urban informal sector, they have two basic categories that they work in. They either work as specific workers, like for example, I'm a teacher, that's a specific job. So also a maid, a kamwali bai, a driver, a chauffeur, delivery person. These are specific jobs. And when I'm saying specific over here, I'm not saying permanent jobs, but they are labels. And they are labels that you can actually tell somebody when you say, "Aap kya kaam kar rahe hain?" You can say, "I'm a kamwali bai." You can say, "I'm a driver." Okay, there are specific jobs. And again, specific does not mean permanent, does not mean guaranteed continuous work, but these are specific labels. And a lot of these works are available, and therefore they come over here. And I'm very sure, given your kind of maturity, you are not surprised in the bracket that I've got over there, commercial sex providers. Okay, they are not over here. Again, I'm repeating, they are not over here for fun. They are not over here for the love of sex. They know that their sex provision will support their families at home. They provide it. This would have happened, I don't know when it will resume once again, but those of you who are staying in the Khar area or in the Malad area, I've seen this because I was tracking it. There will be large amounts of workers gathering over there between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock. And then the Mukadam would come and say, yahan kaam hai, udhar kaam hai, and take workers. And then all those workers, mainly ladies, would be left back. They would not have any money to take back to their children at home. I know that they have indulged in temporary sex provision. Because at least by doing that, they have got themselves 100 or 300 or whatever amount of money, and they are able to support their children and their families, at least for a day or two. Then there's a seasonal footloose daily wage earner. So this is the person who cannot say with certainty what kind of job he's doing. He may be a mathadi worker, he may be a head load carrier, and I'm not talking in terms of those with the billa. In BT station, you'll get the fellow the red shirts, who are your coolies. They are specific workers. And there is, you come to Crawford Market, you come to any of these big markets, and you will see head load carriers waiting to be hired, and they will carry their load, carry your load, take it to the station or wherever you are, and they would be paid. Whenever there's an infrastructure construction or building construction taking place, they would be hired. And when the building is over, do we ever realize and do we ever think in terms of where do they go? During the work time, during the building time, they'll be given temporary space. And then the work is done. Okay, bye-bye. You take care of yourself now. Civic facilities have to be maintained. Roads have to be once again plugged. The potholes have to be plugged, or the drains have to be cleaned, have to be drenched. These people come inside. Tourism-related activities. We know tourism is absolutely seasonal. You'll see a lot of them coming in towards Gateway of India, for example. You'll see them indulging in tourism activities. I'm not talking about the photographers only. I'm talking in terms of somebody will come and sell you bhel puri. Somebody will come and sell you a balloon. Somebody will come and sell you some trinket. So tourism-related activities. Now, whatever be the job that they are doing, I'm sure when we have our discussion, you will not challenge me with these words that I have used over here, that the informal sector job is economically exploitative. I'll make you work for much more hours because there is no contract, and I'll pay you peanuts. Commercially expropriating. This is a pure Marxist word, and Karl Marx talks in terms of expropriating over here is, I create value. As a worker, I create value, which is 5x. And out of that 5x, I get paid only a fraction of that amount. Let's say X. And 4x is taken away as profits. You have done this with me. You have learned the word supernormal profits. This is expropriation of the worker's surplus. Routinely expensive. And this is what I mean by saying education is expensive in urban areas. Bazaar is expensive. Okay, living life generally is very expensive in urban spaces. And socially expunging. By expunging over here, I'm talking in terms of आप एकदम नीच आदमी हो, आप एकदम गंदा काम कर रहे हैं. Okay, you're a useless fellow because look at where you're working. Okay, look at how you're working, and therefore I become a social outcast because of the informal work that I am doing. Now, when you look at all these EXP words that I've put up over here, I want you to go back in your mind and think in terms of any activity. And I'll help you to think of an activity if you cannot think of one. Any activity that you have enjoyed today without even remembering the fact that there is an informal sector worker who down the line has contributed to you enjoying this activity at a particular productive or enjoyable level. And if you cannot think of an activity, here is one activity I'm talking in terms of the use of your toilet. Your toilet is not plugged. You flush and the water takes away your entire human feces. But who keeps the gutters clean? Who keeps the gutters from not getting clogged? And you will see it is the work of people who are exploited, expropriated, who live expensive lives in our urban spaces, and they're socially outcasts. Think in terms of any activity from today onwards, and think in terms of the last person standing, who because of that person, the job that you and I are talking about, or the activity that you and I are talking about, can be enjoyed or indulged in. This is the living condition. And again, as management students, I want to look at each of these bullets and look at them as survival strategies. How can a person actually live a human life, and I've deliberately not used the word dignified life, a human life under these kind of conditions and yet report to work tomorrow? So as management students, what should be worrying you is, would it be possible that these workers' productivity would be far better if the points on this slide that you're looking at were eliminated? I'm thinking about the same kind of workers in Singapore. I'm thinking about the same kind of workers doing the same kind of job in Taiwan. Okay, or you go to a more developed space like UK and all, and you will see their productivities are far better because they do not have to engage with activity, with conditions that are put up on this slide. Horrendous living conditions. Slums, chawls, okay, they are horrendous spaces. Please remember, they share common toilets. And in COVID times, you're sharing common toilets. You can imagine the kind of exposure that you are risking yourself to. And if they are here with their families, then the plight increases multifold times. Because now he has to worry about his family, he has to worry about his mother, he has to worry about his child, he has to worry about his father who is aged and paralyzed, and so many burdens that he brought into the city. And please, I'm sure you will not be saying, why the hell has he brought his family over here? It's exactly the same reason why you brought your family over here if you are a migrant. Because you require that social tie, you require that social bonding. And if you require it because you're a human being, then even they require it because they are human beings. They constantly face food insecurity. And please remember, I'm not saying that this is something only during the lockdown. This is perpetuality. This is in perpetuality. They always face food insecurity, and worse, you'll say, see, I saw that fellow having food. I saw him having a plate full of rice. But then, what about the balanced diet? No? What about nutrition? So they have nutrition deficiencies all the time. Their civic amenities are absolutely inadequate domestically and professionally in the place where they work. If you ever get a chance, I don't know now whether they'll allow you, look at the work conditions of people who are slogging it out in Dharavi. Look at the work conditions of people who are slogging it out in the slums of Antop Hill. Look at the people who are slogging it out in any kind of space that is highly informalized, without proper drainage, without proper sewerage, and these people are working there constantly. So can you see, many of them would be hardened, would be immunized to the kind of disease that you and I are scared about. Because they have always been exposed to malarial spaces, they have always been exposed to areas that is full of mosquitoes, and I'm very sure their immune system is much better. And this is something that I'm having in mind when I'm sure you're reading this in the papers. People are saying Dharavi has improved. Yes, it has improved. And I'm very happy to tell you that one of our students from St. Xavier's College, he is the assistant commissioner over there. His name is Kiran Digaukar. He is the one who brought this all together. But I had to remind Kiran that please remember, you're also working with people who are hardened because they have survived in spite of food insecurity and nutritional deficiencies. And here is something management students I would like you to pay attention to. These people constantly exist in policies blind spots. Why? They are electorally inconsequential because they neither vote in the space they are in nor in the space they come from. So all political parties simply consider them to be nobodies. And because they are nobodies, policy does not know about them. And you can see how blind policy was. It simply gave them 4 hours notice and told them we are going to go into a national level lockdown. We have learned our lessons. I hope you have realized that about 4 days ago, or at least 4 days of warning was given to the Thana, Navi Mumbai area that we are going to go into a lockdown. So that people get ready. If they want to leave that space, they could leave that space. Or they have to provide themselves with various kinds of food material, they could do that. So please remember that policy, if you are engaging in policies, please remember policy has now realized that there's one group of people that they have to constantly look at. Because without this group of people, things will come to an end. You can see UP has learned a lesson. And UP is already talking in terms of creating a workforce commission. They use the word migrant commission, a workforce commission, where people can register themselves and either go to work in another state, and the state would mediate for you to get better work conditions, or they would get better work conditions within the state itself. So now they are coming out of the blind spots, and they are coming into areas that policy will say, we will also work for you. And so I want to wind up this slide by saying that these poor workers that we are talking about are therefore voiceless, they are voteless, and this is what makes them vulnerable. And you've seen the vulnerability when you are looking at the TV, when you're looking at the newspapers, when you're talking about these kind of groups, you've seen how vulnerable this group of people are. Now, during the lockdown, you got to remember that each group, each individual experienced hardship differently. And I told you this at the start of my talk, that poverty is not a homogeneous phenomenon. So poverty differentials leads to diverse hardship experiences. So when you're looking at this slide and I'm talking about each word to you, I want you to remember that the harshness, the impact were different for different groups of people, were different for different individuals and families. But this is a generic kind of an idea that I'm sharing with you, that work stoppage led to loss of employment, loss of income, and whatever little savings they had, those savings started getting wiped out. I have seen and I have met people during these lockdown days, they have conferred with me, they had to take loans. Now look at the collateral damage this lockdown has done. No? These people were already in debt. Now they are deeper in debt. This is why Amartya Sen won the Nobel Prize. He was talking in terms of policy should not look just below the poverty line. And you will see all governments, whether it is the current government or previous governments, they keep on tom-tomming the fact that we brought so many people above the poverty line. But please remember, I'm using numbers so that I'm using measurements so that you'll understand it. They must have picked up people maybe 1 meter from below the poverty line on top. But Amartya Sen is pointing out that the pit, the hole that these poor people are in is more than 10 meters deep. And if you cannot reach the depth of poverty, then you have not brought people out of poverty. What you have done is you have taken people just below the poverty line, and I said metaphorically 1 meter below the poverty line. And where have you brought them up? You have brought them and made them sit above the poverty line. One inflation, one sickness at home, one medical emergency, and bang, they go back below the poverty line. Okay, and I can say this with a lot of confidence that when my family was struggling with poverty, we were so fortunate that we got our education. Today we are sitting very, very deep and entrenched much in the upper middle class group. So sliding down below the poverty line is not going to be something that my family is going to experience, at least in my generation. But these people are constantly on the verge of getting back into poverty. So this is what I was telling you, management students, that when you talk in terms of risks, we always hedge our risks. These people may come above the poverty line. And why is the government saying they come over the poverty line? I gave them a job. What job? I gave them MG Narega jobs. MG Narega jobs works for about 3 or 4 months a year. And with that money, they are expected, let's say 100 days of work, they're expected to pull out 365 days of work. So when you bring me above the poverty line, you are not making sure that I'm permanently above the poverty line. I'm all the time flirting with being above and below the poverty line. And these people, because of their lack of income, they became, during the lockdown and even now, they have become charity dependent for all their basic needs. And why am I punching the word all? I don't know whether there are women sitting over here, but I needed to know this because I have engaged with groups of people like this. And I'm telling it to you because if, like some of you have worked with poor people in Dharavi, please remember there are needs that are gender-based. And when I said all basic needs, we have got calls asking us through NGOs to even give them sanitary napkins, the sanitary pads. So all kinds of basic needs. And even their basic gender-based needs have to be taken care of by private people or by government people. And it's more private because they are more involved with the people, whereas government is more involved with people from afar. Now, in the case of dried food grains, now keep this in mind. Please remember, to cook the food grains, they need water and fuel. And both these things are not sufficiently available or not affordable, and especially fuel, not affordable. So what has happened is many of these poor people have become community kitchen dependent. And you've seen this in movies, you may have experienced it personally, and I hope that you have experienced it personally. They are all cooped up in small little spaces. Small little spaces, 9 feet by 9 meter by 9 meters. And large number of member of the family staying over there with failing civic amenities. Practically no neighborhood realty space. I'm so fortunate. I'm living in the college during lockdown days. I'm living in a 3-acre space. So whenever I'm fed up, I just walk out of my room and roam about the college. I got a gym available to me. These people are staying cheek by jowl. That means they have no other space to move out. They step out of their home, they're in somebody else's home. They step out of their home, they're in a gutter. So there is no realty space that gives them community life. And they are living there with aged people, with sickly people, children, or if they're not with their family, then they're living with colleagues. And I'm hoping that you have come across cases in the paper, in the news, in the TV and all those things, YouTube, where you have seen at least 10 to 12 colleagues staying in the same space. And food given for 5 people are then shared and among 12 people. And that's how they live. And here is something that financially has hurt a lot of poor people. Their rents have begun piling up. You can see the kind of noise that is being made today because of the inflated electricity bills that are coming from the suburbs. Imagine these people also will be facing inflated electricity bills. So their rent, their electricity bills, if their children are in some school where they pay the fees, all these things are piling up. And because they are piling up, and because they also were piling up, they have become homeward bound. I'm not going to go into the stories of how they went home so that we get time to talk to each other. They went on foot, they went on cycles, on auto rickshaws, trucks, etc., etc. And they have constantly been hungry, exhausted. They have been exposed to the vagaries of nature, whether it's heat, whether it is dust, whether it is harsh climates, and the evils of human beings. Okay, where sexual exploitation has taken place, where people have been robbed, where people have been killed, all because those human beings that these poor people encountered were evil in nature, apart from being harassed by the police and local authorities. Okay, so, when we see the police beating up people, we say they deserve it. I'm hoping that you're saying deserve it because that fellow was a tapori guy sitting on his bike and going about having fun. But these are people who are trying to go home. And when the police starts beating them, they're already so famished, they're already so weakened, and the local authorities, the panchayat, the collector sahab, and all these people create hell for them. Now I hope you can understand the meaning of the word voiceless. They have no voices to raise against these people because these are high and mighty people. And the worst of all, policy has neglected them. So they are homeward bound, but they have been encumbered by all these points that I put in the second bullet over there. It is civil society. And I'm hoping that many of us, beginning with me, will be a part of civil society, will be a part of a society that has a heart. Civil society and then political pressure. And I actually use that time frame, and then political pressure. Awaken central and state governments. And why am I saying political pressures? Because please remember, the political party that's in opposition suddenly becomes conscious of the poor. But when these people were in power, the poor were painful people. And now for political capital, for political gain, they wake up and they say, hey, listen, government, you got to do something for these people. And they'll start talking about it, they'll start doing things about it, and it'll become part of their electoral propaganda that we work for the poor. And that's why I wrote it second to civil society. Civil society, I know TIS, Tata Institute, has done a lot of work, which the world may not be knowing, but because of TIS's pressure, the railways were compelled to change in these COVID times. So the government then responded and started these services, but loaded with paperwork. And we are talking about Annadi, we are talking about illiterate people. You load them with paperwork, lots of glitches, and see what you're asking them to do. These are poor people. You're asking them to fill online forms. If you have no smartphone, you're gone. And therefore, you will never get advantage of what the government is providing you. Then they had to stand in long queues in the heat, April May ka heat, to buy their ticket or to get health screening. Because without being screened for health, they would not be allowed to board the trains, which is correct. But then no convenience was offered to these people. So the facility was offered without the convenience being looked into. And once that happens, then the touts, the evil human beings will come in and will start fleecing them for time, for money, and especially for the health certificates. Railway travel became cumbersome. You can read in the papers, lots and lots of problems were faced by the railways. They had to pay for their ticket, and they had to pay slightly more. A surcharge was charged on the ticket. These are people who are already broke. These are people who are having no income. And the railway people are saying, now pay for your ticket. Trains were cancelled. And if you read this about Karnataka, the builder lobby cohorted with the government of Karnataka and made sure that the trains would not start out of Karnataka, would not go out of Karnataka, because then these workers would not leave. And if they would not leave, then these workers would be available for work. So trains were cancelled or diverted from their destinations. Now the excuse that the railway gives is that the lines were jam-packed. And because the lines were jam-packed, let's say heading towards Varanasi, they had to divert the train towards Kolkata. Okay, and then you take people to Kolkata, you do not feed them well, you do not treat them well, and then days later you bring them back into their original destination. Again, civil society woke up and helped in mitigating these hardships. And notice over here, I've definitely not brought in a political party, because these are vultures. These are people who come in to take the political gains that they can get during an election. Life after the lockdown. And after lockdown, we are getting a lockdown. Huh? So this is like a prediction. 120, about 24% of the jobs are lost. 70% are small traders and wage laborers. And why I need you to look at this number 70%? Because these are And the Jamla Dacha students, you will know that when you came out of college and you headed towards Churchgate station, you saw that Chanawala over there. You saw that fellow selling sweets over there. He's not there. I went for a walk once to Oval Maidan. He's not there. So I'm talking about those kind of small traders. The banyas and all may be on, but I'm talking about street vendors. And a little later, I'll talk in terms of how the government is supposed to be looking after these people, but jobs have been lost. As Neil said it at the start, there's an increase in the rural areas, increased pressure in the rural areas because labor supply has increased. And you've done your basic economics with me. When the supply of anything increases, their price will come down. So wages will come crashing down. And here is something that we found extremely difficult to digest. In the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of people panicking and struggling, 4 states, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Gujarat. And you can see who are the governments over there. 4 states came up with labor reforms. And I think they should not have used the word labor reform because that's a total misnomer. All the reforms that they introduced were anti-labor. Increasing the number of hours of work, making sure labor cannot complain, making sure labor cannot get an increment in salary because more Asians have been bought inside over there, making sure that trade unions have been clipped. And by doing this kind of a labor reform, bang in the middle of trouble like this, the government has simply brought shame upon itself. Because when you create hell, and the labor reforms were introduced immediately, because it came via the ordinance route. It did not have been passed by the assembly. The governor signed and it was order and it was law. So immediately wages came down, immediately labor lost its support and security. And by doing that, the government have shot themselves in the foot. Because by reducing my wage, then you're reducing my capacity to demand. And if I cannot demand, you've done basic Keynesian economic, macroeconomics. If I cannot demand, if aggregate demand goes down, then investments will not take place. And if investments don't take place, the system will start spiraling downwards. And here is something management students I want you to pay attention to. You know, the terror unleashed by these reforms is mainly for the formal sector. Because in the informal sector, there is no way in which you can put down a law. That's why it's called informal or unorganized sector. But look at the percolation of that day, of that kind of hardship onto the informal space. And I put it this way, let me read it so that I don't make a mistake. The terror unleashed by reforms in the formal sector will percolate into the informal sector, thereby indirectly damning all informal sector workers. And these are workers who are illiterate. These are workers who have no trade union backing them. So all that the boss has to tell them is, Kaida aisa ho gaya. Kaida mein change ho gaya. And because the law has changed, now you cannot question me. So a lot of them will be taken for a ride. And those EXP words that I was talking to you about, I hope you can see that those words will become even more aggravated for these workers. You know, as I'm winding down, here are some things that as management students, I would like you to engage with, even in the workspace that you are in just now. You cannot come up with a one-size-suits-all principle of governance. Because when you make a law and you say everybody's going to follow it, I'm reminding you that we human beings are not a homogeneous set of people. And our economic outcomes are not homogeneous. So this one-size-suits-all principle becomes problematic and has become a big problem for the poor, because you can see, and here's an example of one-size-suits-all. Lockdown across India in 4 hours. One-size-suits-all. Everybody gets the same treatment. So whether you're poor or whether you're rich, everybody gets the same treatment. And you can see the rich would have already have their fridges all stocked up, and the poor would not have fridges, or they would not have fridges. They would not have any food, maybe in their bags, in their pauti, and in their belly. So this is why I wrote over there. This shows government's lack of sensitivity toward the laboring class. And the evidence I'm presenting to you is the labor reforms, the callous response to the distress of the poor. They beat the poor. They started hitting the poor people. They started putting the poor people in camps. And those camps were like detention camps. Suddenly to be poor was to become a criminal. So a callous nature and the stimulus package. Now let me talk about this because some of you may be having a question on that. You know, when the government came up with that, I think 20 crores or something, I forget the figure, came up with that package and it said it's going to be a revival package. No, it is not a revival package. As management students who have studied finance, I want you to realize that a lot of this money was or is credit-driven money, where the government says, you take a loan from the bank and we will stand as guarantors. But the bank says, I need a collateral. The bank says, I need to hedge the risk. The bank is going to dilly-dally. I know of not a single street vendor who has got money for starting his business once again. And there is a package in the stimulus package. There is a sub-package for street vendors. As students who have done finance, who've done management studies, find out how many vendors have actually benefited from this. And here is the sad thing. The government has not financed the system. The government has driven the entire system through the credit process. It has simply passed the buck onto the banks and told the banks, you create the credit and we'll stand guarantors. Please remember, it is not a fiscal policy. It is not a fiscal push. This is not a fiscal push. So when the finance minister is announcing it, and I've done this with you in class, when the finance minister announces it, it is a fiscal policy. The finance minister is dabbling in monetary policy aspects. And given the nature of the way the central bank is functioning just now, the Reserve Bank of India is functioning just now, it is simply going to acquiesce, it's simply going to say, agree to all that the government of India is asking for. So please look at this package once again. And here's something, and I hope you've not given up writing, at least writing in blogs. Look at whether this is a fiscal policy, which it's supposed to be, or whether it's a hybrid policy. And when I'm saying hybrid, I'm talking in terms of money and peanuts coming from the government's coffers, large amounts of money coming from the banking sector. So you're monetizing the package and not creating funds from the various kinds of, in PM Care. Now that's a scandal. If the PM Care cannot be put to public audits, then what the hell is that money doing? How do we know where that money is being used? And if you want to, you can call me an anti-national, but I need to know where that money is going. Because tons of money has gone over there. Now, why isn't that money brought into the stimulus package? Because that money is lying with the government of India. So when we talk in terms of revival, I have a big question. This package is not a revival package. This is a very cosmetic package that the government of India has brought in. And even when the government of India, the Prime Minister recently announced an extension of free food rate, I think Neil spoke about it at the start, till November, I wanted to remember that around that time, the Bihar elections will take place. This is what I mean by saying capital gains, political gains from policy making. Now you say, what are you saying? No, people are going to get poor, going to get food till that month. But then I reminded you just now that you're giving me dry food grains, but you're not giving me fuel. Then you'll tell me, okay, people can burn wood. Are people going to get wood in the urban space? Will you allow fires to be going up out in a slum? The whole slum will burn out. Okay, so look at the wholesomeness of these packages. As management students, you've got to understand that you've got to have a 360-degree look at these kind of packages that the government talks about. And here is something that was very shameful. Civil society knocked on the doors of the Supreme Court. Please wake up the governments to do something in the month of March, April. And the Supreme Court simply sat and said, we have nothing to do with policy making. And the matter deteriorated. And you saw, then towards the end of May or middle of May, the Supreme Court woke up and ordered the government to do something. Now, all that the Supreme Court, we were appealing to the Supreme Court is, please tell the government to do something in the month of March and April itself. And the kind of hardship that these people had to go through would have been far, far lesser. The next bullet over there is the poor labor is being treated as a good by those in power. And power over here does not only mean political power, it also means those who have money. So now you can see the Kamwali Bai is not being allowed into the building. Why? She may be the COVID carrier. So suddenly, this person who was doing all your work has suddenly become a dangerous person. Okay, so this is the meaning of goods. This is a pure Marxist idea, but you're taking my labor and not appreciating the laborer as the container of that labor. So you're simply treating me as something that can be purchased or something that can be discarded. Once again, I want you to remember, and therefore I hope many of you, after engaging this discussion with me, many of you join civil society. Many of you join these kind of groups that either directly help the poor or indirectly help the poor. And let me wind up with this slide by telling you something that I picked up from somewhere, I don't know where. It took a pandemic and its lockdown for the government and us. I'm calling you and me, the non-poor urban citizens, to finally see, and you know why I put that in quotation, the invisible laboring underbelly of an urban space. Today's generation maintains, and I'm talking to you, I'm talking about your generation, that silence is violence. And you know, I picked this up from the American protests that took place very recently. People of your age came onto the streets and were protesting and were talking in terms of Black Lives Matters. Okay, you've seen two Tamilians were killed in the police station very recently, and no action, no strict action has yet been initiated by the government of India or by the government of Tamil Nadu. So we all talk in terms of the American system and silence and violence and no, let me breathe and those kind of things. But let's just at least pick this up. If silence is violence, then we and the government have to co-breathe. And you know why I picked up the word breathe? Because George Floyd kept on telling the police, I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe. We co-breathe with these poor workers to build a new world social order so that this pandemic's pandemonium, chaos, confusion, absolute disorderliness will give way to orderliness. Thank you. Neil.
Thank you so much, sir. This was, I think, a harsh reality for a lot of us that we have missed. I mean, this whole thing was a reality, as you say, and I just don't know. I'm a little taken aback, but I have some quick, sir, questions before people.
Yeah, please.
People can start asking their questions. So I've asked you.
Can I stop the? Can I come out from the screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I've asked you to start.
So I can show myself.
Yeah.
You talk. You start talking.
So there's this one thing which I feel, and all the participants, you can please, raise your questions and doubts and etc. In the chat box, or raise your hand, and we'll ask you to unmute. So one of the things which is very evident is that the government in today's state and the people at large also have a lot of apathy towards the whole scenario that was building up. And we did not even at a moment acknowledge there is a problem. We refuse till today to acknowledge that there is a serious problem building up in the system. For one small example was the railway issue that you mentioned. The minister does not want to go on record and say, look, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. There is a problem and that let me address this issue. Rather than that, he starts tweeting saying, look, I have more trains available across India and I'll give you whatever you want. This is this problem which I notice across right now is this Twitter nation that is built up, and the whole government starts coming and tweeting rather than acknowledging, look, there is a problem. Let me take a pause. Let us come back and let us address this issue. So, so example, like you said, you give 5 kilo rice and 1 kilo chana, but who will give you spices and who will give you oil, and how will you cook? So it's easy to make image exercise and come and to address the larger mass that look, I'm doing something, you're actually not addressing the real problem. The real problem remains. And how do people change this? There's a big divide in India right now. We are split as a country.
You're asking me to answer that question?
So I think I got floored.
No. What I'm suggesting is when you make a policy, it should be wholesome. So I'm glad you all picked up this small little example I gave you. You give me food grain, you give me dal, you give me all those things, but you're not giving me gaslit. Okay, you have Ujwala, you have all these kind of things, but you're not giving me the kind of facilities that I need to be cooking. And a lot of urban poverty is an overflow of rural poverty. So if you cannot, and this is my suggestion to the government very strongly, I think you've got to replicate MNREGA. You've got to replicate that in urban spaces. So MREGA should become NUEGA, National Urban Renewal Mission, Urban Employment Renewal Mission. So these kind of missions are not taking place. A lot of lip service is taking place. And, a lot of these, I think today's governments are being influenced by Trump. Because here's one guy who refuses to say I made a mistake. Okay, and I don't know whether you're following that. I'm following him because I'm hoping that he will lose the elections in November. But he will never ever accept that he has made a mistake. He'll pass the buck. He'll somehow turn the thing around. So a lot of government pronouncements are that way. We are not making a mistake. Don't talk about the mistake. You talk about I'm doing something more. So you talk about that something more. And if you start talking backwards, you're called anti-national. You start talking something else, people start trolling you. People start abusing you. Today's paper, if you get a chance, all of you, I'm talking to you, all of you, because you've got a lot of online. Today's Indian Express. Today's Indian Express middle by Tavleen Singh. In the middle, the editorial page, look out for Tavleen Singh. And she talks about the new nationalism. The new nationalism is to say yes to whatever the government is doing. And if you say anything, you challenge whatever the government is doing, you're an anti-national. And she said nationalism is love of country. Nationalism is love of the people of the country and those kind of things. Now suddenly it is narrowed down to yes to what the government is doing. Okay. Now what are the questions?
So there's a question. Sorry, his name is not here. He calls himself Physics Returns. He can unmute and ask his question if you want. The gentleman with his name called Physics_Returns Y.S. Can you unmute?
Yeah. Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, sir, now the moratorium is going to be upheld from the month of August. And
uplifted, you're saying, no? Yeah. Okay.
Uplifting of the moratorium is going to be done. And there is many things like the corporates are getting a pay cut of 30%. Okay.
Yeah.
And their money is getting funded into PM Care indirectly. Or you can say like the corporates are funding the PM Care, which is not coming under the CAG, right?
Yes, correct. It's not coming under the CAG.
In the month of August, when this kind of things is going to come, when the banks like HDFC, which funds those people, funds those houses where the men and the women both are working. That is what their ideology is. Okay.
Yeah.
And many of them who have got the 30% cut, they are the someone who are living in a better society in a rented space.
Yeah.
So do you think that in modern India, which is going to come post-lockdown, will there be a urgency of buying a house rather than staying as a rental occupant? Or will there be an urgency to go for a rent rather than buying a house? What do you think, sir?
I cannot give you a straight answer because it all depends upon, one, your credibility. Are you able to get a loan to buy that house? Second, will the market, the realty market, will the prices come crashing down? And when I'm saying crashing down, don't tell me it's come down by 5% and 2%, because 5% of 40 crores and 5% of 1 crore is beyond you and me. So what will be the state of the prices of realty? And the third one is, I've got to take a cost benefit analysis of whether paying the rent or paying the loan interest for the house that I have taken, which one will give me better returns? Now, if you're going to give me a 30% cut, then a lot of what I'm earning, the 70%, a lot of that will have to be spent on survival and not on asset building. So that 30% may have been something that I could build my assets. Now what I've got to do is carry out current expenditures, carry out operational expenditures. So I don't see people rushing for a house, even if the moratorium is lifted up.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
So there's this thing that the government has lately been doing. One I wanted to ask you is, do you think demonetization has led to a higher problem in the informal economy right now? Because we could not come out of it. You had another problem and now you have a pandemic. So has demonetization done a lot of damage to the informal economy as such?
Yeah, definitely. Because who got hurt? You went after black money. That Chandawala was talking about outside your college. He does not have black money. But what happened is his money got stuck in the bank, whatever little money he has. He had to stand for long hours to get that money of his. Policies kept on changing due to demonetization because he had to stand for long hours to get that money. He could not have his money coming from operations. He could not sit down there and sell chena. So informal sector got very badly hit, which unfortunately has not yet been properly researched, has not been properly documented. And this is what I said at the start. Our national income accounts just does not take into account the informal sector. So the pain and the strain and therefore the drain on the informal sector has not been accounted for by demonetization. We know that big companies got hit and those kind of things. And in 6 months later, GST came inside. Again, GST went for a toss. Okay, because GST policies kept on changing. And unfortunately for this government, a pandemic comes and hits you there. Okay, when the country is already slowing down, the national income growth rate was already slowing down, a pandemic comes and hits you. So the starting point is, I think, demonetization, where the deceleration began. And I think then the downslide could not be controlled at all. And now it cannot be controlled because of nature. And the word that we normally use in economics is Malthusian, Malthus. Malthus is the name of an economist who simply said, when things go bad, nature will step in and set things right. So for us in economics, we are saying this is Malthusian. Okay, nature has simply said things have gone too far. Now we will take over. Now nature takes over. And you can see none of us can challenge nature. Somebody told me this, you may have heard of this. If you put all these viruses together, this COVID virus, you capture them and bring them all together, they'll be about 2 or 3 kilograms, it seems. 2 or 3 kilograms has taken out the wind of nearly 7 billion people. You cannot challenge nature. So the Malthusian, and use that word in your normal talk, the Malthusian checks have further dampened the artificial checks. Artificial checks would be things like you and I can do, fiscal policy, monetary policy. So this is a very Malthusian concept that is taking place just now. When Malthus said in the 1800s, food increases at a arithmetic pace, whereas population grows at a geometric pace. So this gap between population growth rate and food growth rate will create hunger and people will die. And because of that gap, wars will take place. People will die. That's the Malthusian concept. Death will increase, and population and food rate and food growth rate will once again become concurrent. So I wanted to explain that Malthus to you so that you can use that term in your daily vocabulary. Malthusian checks.
There's this one more thing which I was reading and I noticed is that the FCI, which is the Food Corporation of India, which holds all the stock, we are actually surplus of stock, and early during the pandemic, the government decided that we will divert it to make alcohol grains, which was, I don't know, very strange.
For this, that were for your hand sanitizer.
Yeah. which was very strange that we had people who had no food and we could have just given it away for free, but we wanted to make sanitizer. The second thing is that the government has been indulging to keep their balance sheets clear is to not fund FCI adequately enough, and actually a very positive, FCI has always been positive in their balance sheets forever, has actually become a debtor. Is actually owing money to the National Small Savings Schemes. So technically, my money is being funded to again fund and give away. So for FCI goes and buys is for the minimum purchase of agriculture procurement price. So you do that, and then you are supposed to give it away. So that deficit is what we call as the gap, which is supposed to be filled by the budget. But now it's not being filled by the budget. Now it is going and borrowing it from the National Savings Scheme, which is again whatever I go and deposit.
Yes.
And there is another interest that is supposed to be paid by FCI. And again, FCI is a government entity. That means it's people's money technically. That means it's technically becoming a double whammy for FCI, and it will end up becoming a debtor and may go bankrupt in some time.
Yeah. I'm agreeing with that. A concept that you management students have to be looking at is that we are now talking in terms of monetizing the debt. Now, what's the meaning of monetizing the debt? Again, I saw this in today's paper, yesterday's paper, where that economist is simply saying it would be better if the government simply prints more money and pumps it into the system, rather than take heavy loans from abroad at very high interest rates. Okay, so that is called monetizing the debt. But whatever you're doing, if you are creating more money into the system, please remember the backlash is going to be inflation. Prices will start rising. And in the case of FCI, prices will start rising because of what? Again, we did this in your first year. Prices will start rising because of cost push inflation. FCI will say it is becoming costly for me to maintain my operations. And I'm going to pass on that burden to the consumers. So food grain to the PDS, public distribution system, will not be as cheaply available to the poor. FCI and FCI is mainly for feeding the PDS system, the public distribution system. It is not the place where your mummy or your wife or your, the household person goes and buys from the open market. FCI is mainly a buffer stocking space. And we've got in Kandivli, in the Kandivli godowns, FCI godowns in Kandivli, tons and tons of wheat is lying over there. And the scare is with this rains, the wheat can start sprouting. And once the wheat sprouts, it's spoiled. At least about, I think, 1/8 of the wheat, I've been to the FCI godown, 1/8 of the wheat is kept in open spaces under tarpatri, they call it, canvas.
Tarpaulins,
yeah, tarpaulins. Okay. Now, tarpaulin may not, if the tarpaulin has one leak, water will enter inside of it. So, FCI is going to become a debtor nation and a debtor entity, but this is what the government is trying to do. And this is across all governments, whether it's Manmohan Singh government or this government, make the public sector companies weaker and weaker and weaker, so that because they cannot shape up, they will have to ship out. And I've taught you these slogans: if you can't mend it, end it. And the whole food grain sector will then go to the private sector. Okay, why? FCI has become a financial monolith that cannot be corrected. There's something else to ask about China.
I can see one question from Anurag right now. Anurag is saying, can we expect any government to come up with customized plans, if not one size fits all, during the times like these?
When I'm saying one size suits all, you don't make a thing for the entire nation. Why don't you go in for decentralization? So let states handle the issue. And now when I'm saying states, I'm telling states to be very conscious that there are districts in the state. So this whole decentralization with a monitoring taking place from top. Here what is happening, it's a top-down order. But when we talk in terms of democracy, we always talk in terms of the down process. Okay, what the people require is what policy should do and then deliver. Okay, here what is happening is becoming very totalitarian. The government orders something and everybody is supposed to follow it. So this one size suits all should be going away. And I do hope you know that where I picked this term from. This term was created by the World Bank. One size suits all. It worked in Chile, it will work in Poland. It worked in Poland, it will work in Malaysia. And across the world, they started applying the same template for economic growth. It's come from the World Bank's literature. Huh? One size suits all.
So there's another question saying, how do you think that corruption would fuel our economic development as it did in UPA 2?
Corruption. Corruption or inflation?
No, corruption. How do you think that corruption would fuel our economic development as it did in UPA 2? I think it's a sarcastic question because there was
I mean, I have told you all this in class that corruption is not something academic. So I really don't know how to answer this, because the moment you're corrupt, you're either going to suck out money from the system, or you're going to simply make the system go into a cost push inflation, where because you're asking for a higher price, you want that service to be performed, then you also got to pay me under the table. So the service which is X is now becoming 2X and 3X. So there's inflation coming inside automatically. And because I have to pay 3X for that, I'll come and tell my boss, you have to pay me a little more, because my services now that I am accessing are becoming expensive. Okay, so corruption, whoever that person is who has spoken in terms of, I hope it's a sarcastic and I hope it's a revealing kind of a question. But I do hope you can see that corruption is definitely a economy degrading phenomenon. And whether it is UPA 2 or whether it is, even in UK, you're getting in USA, you're getting a lot of corruption just now. This Donald Trump is a corrupt person. He has totally corrupted the entire system. He has no respect for law. So once you're corrupt, law goes for a toss. And if law goes for a toss, then that last statement of mine, pandemonium will settle. And once pandemonium sets in, then no phenomenon can be corrected. I'm not answering the question because I told you I don't engage with corruption at all. I cannot create a mathematical model on corruption and tell you because X plus Y, Z takes place.
The next question is, government has started the food security and social security. Did this ever help in the corona lockdown?
Not only the lockdown, please remember any kind of food security that you offer will be of use to the poor. But the problem that we are having, and again, those of you are taking down authors that you can engage with, please look out for Jean Dreze, Jean Dreze, Dreze, and this person who I'm going to name is now with the economist in IIM Ahmedabad, Ritika, Reetika, Ritika Khera, Khera. Jean Dreze and Ritika Khera are the godparents of M. Narega. They created this concept, and today Ritika Khera is constantly working with food security. And she keeps talking in terms of one thing that's lacking in food security in India, the Food Security Act that you're talking about, is that there is no concern for nutrition. So just a few days ago, a colleague of mine told me, I know that you're eating, but is it nutritious? Because you're constantly eating the same kind of meal. Okay, you have not taken in proteins, you have not added this and that. Okay, I just brought an example of myself so that you'll understand what I'm trying to share. That just giving me food does not mean that you're guaranteeing me health. Because food will keep me alive, but I may be living a unhealthy life. So I think the Food Security Act, somewhere down the line, has to bring in the concept of nutrition. So what kind of food are you providing me through the Act? I think that has to be taken into account. And I think those days of when we were students, it used to be tom-tomed. Hey, India is such a large population. I think that is gone. That story is gone. That narrative cannot be repeated now. Because there is plenty available. And today we have so much of algorithm and so much of computerization that it is possible for us to, use these transportation models and all, and make sure that the farthest space in India is reached. Whereas when we were students, we did not have these sophisticated models. We did not have computerization to reach to the farthest place in India. Your generation is really both fortunate and going to be held responsible if you do not use these technologies to reach what Gandhiji spoke in terms of the least of the poor, or what Amartya Sen spoke about at the bottom of the pit. Okay, today you all have the systems to do that. I think you all should be doing that. So I'm passing the buck on to you all and making you all responsible that you people, with the kind of training that you all have come in, you should be responsible for universalizing. Ritika Khera uses that word, universalizing health through food and nutrition.
So the next question is, what is your opinion about boycott of Chinese products or services or investments in India?
I think that's a knee-jerk reaction just now. If you stop the Chinese goods, I think our earphone will stop working. Okay, a lot of what you and I are using just now, there will be some Chinese component in it. I think this is a knee-jerk reaction. This is just to create a diversion of attention that we are talking in terms of rejecting these kind of goods. Look at the amount of goods that have penetrated the Indian market. So once you start withdrawing that good, again aggregate demand will start falling. So I think this is extremely knee-jerk. We cannot afford to boycott. What we got to do is go in for diplomacy. And through diplomacy, solve this problem. What yesterday somebody was asking me, is China and India using this clash to divert people's attention from the government's failure to control or to suppress the COVID problem? So both these countries are diverting attention and talking about the nationalistic spirit and those kind of things when this kind of medical emergency is taking place. So I told that person I would give a lot of credence to what you are saying. There's a lot of credibility to what you are saying, that these countries may be using diversionary tactics, that don't look at the medical problem, look at the nationalist problem. Look beyond yourself, look at the nation. So this will die off. This whole Chinese cutting going away and all, I think this will die off. One, diplomacy sets inside. And fortunately now the Doval, what is he? National Security Advisor. He started, he's now, at last he's come onto the scene and he's going to be talking to the Chinese counterpart.
The next question is, as individuals, we are also suffering losses in our earnings. Banks are not stable. Yes. The interest rates are low and the saving investments have gone down. What as an individual should we do to take precaution and not depending on government for solution?
Yeah. I'm going to be very Gandhian in this case just now. And I remember telling my grandniece, she's a young girl who's in Xavier's and highty-flighty kind of a person. So I told her, listen, for the last 3 months, you have lived with so little of cosmetics and your beauty has not diminished. Okay, your health has not deteriorated. Okay, I kept on telling my friends and telling myself, I have learned to live with little. Can we now take this as a new normal, that we do not require so much to survive? So maybe I told you this is Malthusian. Maybe this is what nature is telling us. Hey, listen, you fellows have gone overboard in your wants, in your demands. So if we can now stretch that normal, that new normal to become the permanent normal, I think our these cuts that you're talking in terms of will help us to survive. I'm not in favor of the cuts. I'm not in favor of it. But I'm just trying to come up with a strategy that we have already experienced for the last 100 and something days, you said at the start of the talk. If for so many days I've got used to and habituated to living with little and living. Okay, you can see I'm pretty healthy, you're pretty healthy. We can carry all that on. Why switch back to indulgences? Why switch back to abundance? Okay, and this is what Gandhiji, this is what Buddha, even Buddha spoke in terms of that. Limit your wants. Nature, I think nature was telling us that. Limit your wants. You've been having an excessive. Not minimalization, I'm talking in terms of the optimal minimum. Otherwise, minimalization is you're saying, have only one meal a day. No. Have your meals, please. But I'm saying don't go overboard. We have done without restaurants for so many days. Have you realized that? And we have survived. So nature has given us that lesson. And I'm no preacher. I'm not somebody who will preach. I'm very scientific in my approach. But I'm saying this is what I've learned. That nature has told me you can live with little. Optimal little.
So the next question is, post-lockdown, do you think that the consumption story would be redefined in the urban society?
Yes, and that's what I was just talking to you about. I'm hoping that urban society, which is a very consumerist society, really begins to clamp down. But the danger is, as the clamping down on your consumption takes place, investors will be hurt. So maybe at some point of time, I'm talking about your grandchildren. Around that time, you will not have investments taking place in ultra luxuries. You will not have investments taking place in superfluities. Okay, the foundational requirement for human life, I think investment will start taking place in that. And that's how human beings survive. No? Down the line, go back 1,000 years, 10,000 years, and see human beings survived on the basic minimum. But today we call ourselves civilized because we have 2 computers, we have so many rooms, we have so many vehicles, and we call ourselves civilized. Have you realized the petroleum sector has been badly hit in the lockdown? The demand for petroleum has gone crashing down. No, this sector has to once again revive itself. Let's not say petroleum, I'm wrong. The fuel sector, whether it's diesel or petrol or CNG.
So the
Because
prices have not
the traffic
been
went down, no? And prices are going up. No, I heard.
Yeah, the prices are
Price
going
of
up.
petrol, prices are going up.
Government is taxing it at a very high rate, right?
Yeah. I forget the full form. Yeah, I think I can recall it. I saw one cartoon where the government is showing, hey, GDP upar ja rahe. Gas, diesel and petrol. GDP, na? Gas, diesel and petrol upar ja rahe.
So this thing is, there's this something called urban poor, which I thought got hurt the most.
Yeah.
They are that people who will not want to beg for food. They will not want to go out and say that we are poor, and they have been hit the most.
Yes.
How do you think all of us can try to reach out at them and
to use a very harsh phrase, their chamdi has come out now. No, this chamdi of I am not poor. So now they've come. Harsh reality has hit them, and they will have to admit that listen, they have either been living beyond their means, that means living in debt, living on borrowed funds, living on parasiting. So I think that has to now be put under control. So rather than talk in terms of those people, because you're asking how to help them, I would ask you to reach out to the genuine poor. Because these people, once they're chamdi, the whole fact that they're living on, once that melts, they will automatically fall into the group that you are helping out. So please talk in terms of the real poor and not the pseudo poor.
So what would be better?
The help that you...
Sorry.
The help that you reached out to in Dharavi,
Yeah.
Now that was to the real poor, not the pseudo poor. Because the pseudo poor, the moment you start helping them, they will remain in that state. Paisa mil raha hai na, kaam kyun karne ka? That typical tapori kind of a thing, no? Paisa mil raha hai, I'm ji rahe. You were asking me something.
So what is better, I think, see the government wants to do away with the PDS system and want to go towards the direct benefit transfer. They claim this is to stop leakages in the system. But what do you think is the better, the cash transfer or the PDS system? What would actually serve the purpose?
DCT, direct cash transfer, is a big problem. Is a problem. You know why? You will transfer $5,000 to my account for the rest of my life. But that $5,000 is not being indexed to inflation. So if you're telling me direct cash transfer, and you're telling me, see, aapko paisa diya maine, what is the real purchasing power of that money? Whereas when you give me food grains, you're giving me food grains. I'm not engaging with inflation. So that experience or that aspect has to be taken into account. So if you're telling me that the DCT, direct cash transfer, is going to be, and I'm using a word, all of you have to use this word in your vocabulary, that DCT is going to be indexed to the inflation. And my salary is indexed. Huh? I don't know how many of you are indexed. I get a DA, dearness allowance. I don't know, you all know that word, dearness allowance?
It's the government employees.
My salary slip, my salary slip has a DA on it. Now, if you don't give me a DA, then 5,000 deteriorates. Huh? And because 5,000 deteriorates, my consumption will deteriorate, my nutritional intake will deteriorate, my health will deteriorate. So please look out for this if you're writing a paper, if you're discussing people. Indexation of the DCT. Just as my salary, I'm a government servant, just as my salary Professor Lagate's salary is having an indexation and we get the DA component, I think there should be a DA component to DCT. Without that, you're being unfair. Since you brought me to a DCT, I want to also talk to you about the CCT. CCT, Brazil is using that. Conditional cash transfer. And what is conditional cash transfer? I'll give you cash. But every month you have to show me that your child is in school. If you have a baby, you've got to show me that the baby has been given all the vaccines. And only if all the vaccines have been given to that baby, you'll get your cash. Conditional cash transfer. Do look at that. So there is an argument for CCT versus DCT. And please remember, Brazil is the third most populated country in the world. And Brazil has done a successful job with CCTs, conditional cash transfer. Therefore, Brazil's Human Development Index is better than India's Human Development Index score.
So
CCTs, conditional cash transfer. Yeah.
There's one more question. It says, do you think post-lockdown the car sales will go up than bikes?
I don't know. I really don't. But I'm not engaged with these kind of commodities.
I'll
if
just
you ask me to engage with food and those kind of things,
so I really don't know. I'm coming to the next one is the Rubini, who is that famous economist. He has predicted that the world may see a severe food crisis in the months to come. And he believes that it's just accelerating. He's been saying this for a year, I think a couple of years now. But he says it's finally accelerating towards a food crisis in the whole world. You think that is correct, or he's just being a little over?
I think he's being a nihilist. He's being a pessimist. Because you got to remember that the world as now, if it was in the 1800s, I would say yes to him. 1800s or even 1918, that pandemic was in 1918.
Spanish. Yeah.
The Spanish flu pandemic. I would say yes, because Malthusian checks would be very powerful. Today, we have a lot of technology. Today, we have GM crops. I'm talking about just tiding over. I'm not in favor of GM. But to tide over this problem, we have science that can help us to build up our stocks. We have better storage facilities. We have better transport facilities to reach out to Burkina Faso, the poorest country in the world. Okay, so food delivery would be much better now than in those days. So I think he's being a bit too pessimistic. Another point that I would like you to pay attention to is you got to also remember, I'm hoping that I'm going to be proved wrong, that a lot of people are dying. And when death rate increases, can you see population growth rate slows down? And if population growth rate slows down, then the food growth rate and population growth rate will start moving towards each other. And food growth rate is increasing. In India, we had the Green Revolution. So similarly, we have the Philippines Revolution, we have the American Revolution in food. So I think he's being a bit too pessimistic. We are living in a modern world. We are not living in the 20th or the 19th century. This is the 21st century.
So we'll take one more question, then I'll ask you some 5 personal questions that I told you.
Okay.
And then we'll call it a day.
No, but then you'll have to pay me, huh?
Yeah, that also I've already told people, and I'll again announce it right away. Aadhaar being challenged in the court on privacy issues, which I think has already been resolved. So it's been closed by the Supreme Court. Without having been checked on the government schemes, I mean, I think this is towards the direct cash benefit thing, which is Aadhaar based. So do you think it will do the desired result by using Aadhaar for doing the PDS and
I think you'll be able to control corruption. You'll be able to control leakages in the PDS. Okay, you will also be it will also end up reaching out to the target groups. Okay, like for example, I have no right to be using the PDS, but if I'm a corrupt person, I can always fake the kind of income that I'm having, get hold of an orange card and get into the PDS. Okay, so I think the linking of the Aadhaar from that point of view, apart from the privacy issues, will definitely help in plugging 2 things I'm saying, in plugging the leakages and in controlling corruption in the PDS, public distribution system. So as long as it's in that area, I have no issues. But once it comes to interfering in my life, Once it comes to government knowing where I am and all those kind of things, then I have privacy issues. Okay, so as long as it's a strategy for plugging leakage, I'm going to say yes. So once I'm out of the PDS, the government should delink me from my, to delink my Aadhaar connection to whatever system they are looking at. Like I should have been dealing maybe about 20 years ago from the PDS. So if this was that 20 years ago, on the day that I have proven that I'm paying my income tax, I'm getting my constant income and those kind of things, you delink my Aadhaar connection from that system.
Okay. So all the participants, before I go to the quick questions with sir to make it a little bit more lighter and personal with him, there's a small request is that which would be we saying thank you to sir as a gratitude for him for teaching us and spending time with us also today, is that we all take a pledge that we would go out and donate any amount, small, big. The amount is not supposed to, is your choice, but you give it to any mandal, temple, church, masjid, gurudwara, any NGO which is feeding the unprivileged. And so it's just that God has been very kind to us. We have survived more than 100 days in this lockdown with all good food. I think a little bit sharing will not reduce what we have. So this is a pledge, and this is a pledge that I told sir that all of us will do it, and that's what we all agree that we'll do, and we'll donate is what I have assured him.
Okay, so you'll pay me for this lecture of mine. That's my payment.
Yes, I will, sir. I'll redonate it, Dharavi boys.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, sir, just to make it a little bit lighter, so we'll do the quick questions.
Okay.
One unique thing you did during the lockdown?
I'm going to turn this and you'll see, can you see my bookshelf?
Yes, we can see your
Can you see my bookshelf?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So I did a lot of catching up on my reading. To keep my sanity, I kept on reading. My photograph is gone off. Huh? It's come.
Okay.
I did a lot of reading, Neil, in this period. A lot of catching up. And read left, right, and center. Huh? Left, right, and center is what I read. I was more interested in reading about colonization. How did the world get colonized? Because I'm trying to extrapolate that idea of colonization into globalization. I'm trying to make that extrapolation.
That how both of them are similar. How globalization nearly is mimicked.
Yeah. The similarities and yet dissimilar, because this is financial, no? Globalization.
So then, sir, you have been reading, so books that you will recommend all the participants to read?
Yeah. I've got a soft copy of that book, so I would urge you to ask me for that soft copy. What I'll do is I'll centrally give it with Neil and then you can take it. It's a book. I'll show you the book. This is the book. Okay. It is Naomi Klein, Naomi Klein, Naomi Klein. She's a Canadian economist. The Shock Doctrine. Naomi Klein, The Shock Doctrine. And I'm very fortunate, the book was lying on my shelf for about a year or two. And I took up the reading in this COVID time. And she talks in terms of when a system is down and under, and the people are concerned about their survival, that's the time governments bring in change. Catching people unaware. Or people are not ready to take up the challenges and come out on the street and fight and all. So she talks in terms of Latin America. She talks in terms of Indonesia. And she comes very, very recently to the tsunami in Sri Lanka. And how the fisher folks on the beach of Sri Lanka, on the east coast of Sri Lanka, were simply pushed much. She's not a German. Somebody is asking she's a German.
Yeah,
she's a Canadian. She's a Canadian economist. Studied in America. She studied in America. But she is becoming the voice today, Naomi Klein.
Which is identical to India also, sir. We have also, we are bringing a lot of changes right now with the whole idea that nobody is going to question.
Yes, not nobody going to question. Nobody has the stamina. We are so tired. We are so caught up with other things. Where's the stamina now to take on the government? Bring in the law now. And she's brought in the term disaster capitalism. So if you're not going to read the book, at least go to the internet and look out for the term disaster capitalism.
So the next question is an advice. Sorry, before this, I'll ask this question. I think one event in your life which changed you as a person forever.
This happened during my school days. My school days, I'm talking about the 1970s, where as a poor person, I saw a poor person and a dog fighting for food in a garbage bin. And I said to myself, at least I don't have to fight that way. And I took a pledge at that point of time, I will study. I will study. I never knew what I was going to be studying, but I will study. So if you ask me, I can actually go back to that day when I saw that happening outside my house in Parel. In some gully of Parel, I saw that happening. And remember 70s, the municipality was not very clean, and the picking up of garbage and all was not very often. So there was a lot of garbage over there, and a poor person and a dog. He was fighting with the dog because they were wanting the same bread or chapati or whatever was falling over there. That changed my life. Therefore, my PhD, you will notice, is with people who work with the garbage.
It's the rack picker and the recycling informal, I guess.
The recycling informal.
Sir, as a mentor, what do you advise all of us? One advice you will give all of us.
The advice I'm giving you, I think I've not said this in your class, is Q cubed. Q cubed. Question, quiz, and quest. Question. A lot of my colleagues tell me, hey, shut up because you're creating problems for us. Students are asking us questions, students are very challenging us and those kind of things. But I'm asking you, and I say this openly from all the forums that I go to. Question. If you don't question, things will remain as they are. Question, quiz, so that your intelligence builds up, and reach out for the stars, Quest. You keep questing. And it has been a success in my life. The QQ formula has worked for me. Today, I am a painful person for even some of my colleagues. Because I keep asking, why are you doing that?
So one brand that surprised you during this lockdown?
What has surprised me is now I'm getting a lot of my newspapers online. And Indian Express, when that thing comes to me, the opening of that, I don't know how to call it, but when the paper comes to my inbox, I'm seeing ICICI being advertised over there. So when I download it, I get ICICI ad first and then the news. So here is a financial sector that is, simply rearing its head up in spite of all the pandemic issues that are taking place. And what is shocking for me is if you look at all the hoardings in the country, in the city just now, the hoardings are yet with COVID. You see all public hoardings are yet talking about COVID, whether it's on the bus stop, whether it's on the VT station or wherever. But this is a new channel that the financial sector is taking place. For me, that has been shocking. It may not be shocking for you, but for me, it is startling that in the midst of all this pandemic, here comes ICICI.
Okay. I'll ask you last two questions. As a successful person, what is your daily routine? You were principal for Xavier's College for nearly 3 years if I'm not.
My success has been my steadiness in my routine. Okay. And again, I'm very fond of alliteration. I wake, I work, I weary out, and I whiz off to bed. Okay. I wake, I work, I weary myself out, and I whiz off to bed. That has been my constant throughout my life.
So one of the last questions, there's one question.
And by the way, are you calling me successful because I was principal?
No, I'm calling you successful.
I
because
hope
of
you're not
your
using that as a.
No,
I think my success is more my human relationships.
You're one of the best humans we have ever met, and I think everyone who has studied under you will realize. And I told you this when I met you the first time. I told you if you were my economics teacher, I would have done my graduation. I would have done my PhD in economics. So one question is, if you were not a professor of economics, what would you like to be? What would you have become?
I don't know, because the only job that I have done is teaching. From day one of my graduation, I was called by Xavier's, come and teach. Okay, so I don't know of any other job, but if you're forcing me to look out for another job, I think I would have loved to have been a policymaker in a bank. That means I'm looking at RBI. I'm looking at RBI and those kind of things. Policy making. But this is a far-fetched thought of mine, because today you're asking me or forcing me to say something, I'm saying something. I would have not said it when I was your age. I would have not said this as a fresh graduate. But today, in hindsight, I can say that, no? Because I know the importance of policy.
Rajesh has been kind enough. He shared the book, The Shock Doctor, in the chat box already. So anybody who wants to download, they can download it right away. So one last question we'll take. Suyash is asking, there were voices to reforms in the education sector in the pre-COVID days. How does it change post-COVID? How significant is education reforms for India?
You know, the sad thing of the reforms today is, and I'm writing a paper, it'll come, I'm writing it with a student. We are looking at the virtualization of education. And we are saying that is going to be the new normal in education. That we can have discussions like this, online discussions, okay? So they're assuming that this is going to be the new reform, or going to be the reforms of education. I don't think that's going to be the reforms. The reforms should definitely bring in the 3 Qs. Make sure, unlike me, I grew up as a mugger. I mugged because I knew what questions were coming. I got good marks, but I never learned. I learned only as a teacher. So I think the reform should bring in the 3 Qs that I spoke to you about. No? Question, quiz, and quest. I hope the new reform, the whole new education policy is going to be looking at that. That means your grandchildren should be people who create hell for the teachers and create hell for the parents at home. Like till today, I am not able to answer one question, and my what do I call her? My grandniece has asked me. I have not been able to ask. And she was, I think, about 4 or 5 years old when she asked me that question. Why is water wet? Why is water wet? I don't know how to answer that question. But it got me into thinking more that, hey, listen, you can't answer that question. You're not a shana. You're not as shana as you think you are. I don't know what I must have told her, but till today I'm carrying that question in my head. Why is water wet?
So this has been a very interesting session, very provoking. I hope people who see this later on also will have a lot of queries in their mind to go back and ask questions.
Oh, this has been recorded?
Yes, this has been recorded.
Oh, wow.
And
I hope my voice was clear.
Yeah, so it's been clear. And I'll pitch it if required. Sir, any final words you have before we close the webinar?
I'm not a preacher. I don't give all these kind of...
So
you ask me specific and I'll tell you.
One sentence you have to say, sir. This is what you think that your students, you should...
as students, I want you to quiz, question, and quest. And tell people that I'm saying that so that they know whom to give the galis to. Okay? That I corrupted you. Okay?
So I want to add to what sir is saying, that it should all also be going ahead and say, let justice be done though the heavens fall. So when you question, no problem, whatever it takes, let there be, whatever happen, whatever it takes, kind of a thing. So
yes.
One last question just came up saying, how did you tackle with tough situations that broke you down, and how did you cope up with tough situations that broke you down? It's a very out of context question.
No, but whenever I fell, I had to get up. Because I knew if I did not get up, I would not be able to survive. So if you can have that grit and determination, no? That come what may. I like what you said towards the end, no? Come what may. I'll really get up. Because if I don't get up, I'll be trampled upon. And I'm not saying get up means rubabi. Huh? There's not rubabi and, pride and all those kind of things. I have to get up. So I'm suggesting that to you all, no? Just get up. And start from zero. Start from scratch. But please get up.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us this evening. It's been such a delightful experience. And I encourage everyone to unmute and say thank you to sir.
How many were there? How many students were there?
So we did a peak of about 36, 37. And now
Oh,
we are
wow.
about
No, I'm looking at it from the point of view of how many people get helped. Because all of you are going to help people.
Yes,
So 36 times 36. 36 raised to 36. So many people will get benefited because of you all.